Hey y'all, welcome back to the Fruit Punch Podcast. I'm here with Mama Ray, the producer. I'm Lucas, and we've got someone new on the mic today. They are a musician and artist out of Denver, Colorado. They are very good at what they do, and their name is Hannah. You can get them on hannahbliss.bandcamp.com. And would you like to say a couple of words?
Yeah, so hello everybody. I'm super excited to be here with Mama Ray and Lucas. My name is Hannah Bliss. If you ever search that, just know it's only one H, no space. I am on Bandcamp. I'm also on SoundCloud and YouTube. I just make all of my music is channeled freestyle, just flowing in the car. I just am absolutely in love with that style of making music. Super open to all other forms of creation, opening up my mind to podcasts as well, and really looking forward to what we can do here. So, thank you guys for this opportunity.
Today we are going to talk about a tougher subject than we have been. Yesterday in the car, Lucas and I were talking,
I'm horrified.
and yeah, he always is horrified when I do this.
It's always here, guns up. Here's a question.
It's a question. So, let's just start this way. So, Luke, what did it feel like emotionally when you were getting high?
I prefer not to talk about that.
No, it's an important question
I
because the what we were talking about yesterday, if you
no,
remember,
but
was
that's such a
is
complex issue because like the emotions that you're feeling are bipolar. Um, you feel immense shame, but you also feel an immense escape, and that's all I'll get into on that.
okay, because what we were talking about yesterday was is the contradiction between how the impact is on the addict versus how the impact is on the family.
Oh,
Did you
right.
remember that discussion?
So I guess I can get into the science a little bit. Um, Persistent dependent drug use is usually classified by an intense urge to do so past consequence. And that's where it becomes a behavioral problem, where it becomes a mental health issue. So there's this thing, right? The amygdala. It's in the very center bottom of your brain. And it's very tiny, but what it
So we're gonna
does.
blame the amygdala. I don't even know what the hell amygdala is.
Well, I'm going to teach you.
Sounds like a little scary fungus that's at the bottom of the ocean.
It could be. It could be. There might be amygdala fungus. But what I'm saying is this thing creates your fight or flight response. Okay? And when it does that, basically what drugs do and what other things can do, they carve pathways that are directly to that amygdala. So, what happens then is because your amygdala does your fight, flight, fawn, or freeze response, you get jacked up to number one, where it's like, hey, drugs made you feel good for a minute while you were feeling real bad there. That could be good for survival. You should put that on list number one, you know? And so it becomes this like gamble, where you shouldn't be doing these things. But your body tells you you need this to survive. And like I got it really explained well to me recently by Hannah actually. It's like tell someone to hold their breath. Okay? Mom, actually real quick, hold your breath.
Okay, I'm old. How long?
How long can you?
No, I think I'm done.
Well, Mom, why did you breathe? I told you not to breathe.
I don't know why I breathe. I breathe because I had
Because
to.
you had to. That's what drugs are.
Yeah, and I get that. But what we were talking about yesterday, and that actually was a beautiful breakdown because I think a lot of people out there can relate to what you're trying to explain. But what we were talking about, if you remember, was is it your perception of the events of your addiction and mine literally do not coincide.
Well, okay, so it's funny because when you're so down the road of this sort of thing, I find that essentially you're living in your own magic movie, you know? So, like, the way events play out, you are determined that it's how you thought it was. And you'd never think about what your part in things are. You never think about what you did to hurt somebody because at the end of the day, you're the main protagonist. That's what matters, right?
Right.
So I think that the emotional perception shifts because you're going Batman mode off deep end drugs, and you think you're doing the right thing no matter what is actually going on inside your head. And then that can clash with what the reality is on the outside. I think that that's mainly what it gets down to. I live in a magic movie when I'm high out of my mind.
Do you think that addicts become narcissists?
I think that we're all narcissists to a degree. It just depends on how much you harness that.
Because I noticed that in some of our previous conversations, because our conversations have changed dramatically over
Do
the
you
last
mean
few
because
months.
of the necessitation to like lie and cheat and steal in order to get by?
More than that, for instance, if something goes wrong, there seems to be an insistence by addicts, and I'm not talking about you, Luke, although this was probably true about you a few months ago, that they need you to believe to the depths of your feet that it's not them, they're not high, or that they're not anything. That they look you right in the face and like will gaslight you. And I've
It's for
even seen it.
survival.
How is
Because
it
you know your
survival?
perceived consequence of someone understanding could be your bed. It could be your life. It could be you on a sidewalk. It could be you not seeing your kid. All of these
And Hannah,
things.
you can jump in anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. All of these things coincide into that amygdala we were talking about earlier, because your fight or flight triggers and goes, drugs are the most important thing right now, idiot. And that just becomes primary number one. It's above food, it's above water,
See,
it's
I guess that's
above.
the part that it's hard for me to
It's the
wrap myself
first
around is that
thing.
you're willing to do drugs at the risk of losing your family, your
But that's the
friends,
thing
your
is like
life.
you might not have ever had an addiction then,
I
because
did, but I guess I'm a real stubborn person.
sure, but like also it's just not sustainable to shame yourself all the way down the drug line. It's not.
Well, it's not
And
about shame. It's about literally losing your family, your friends, your life, your livelihood. Your I have seen you. I've seen other people who were willing to even smoking weed.
think about emotional codependent relationships,
Okay, I'm trying. I'm trying to
right?
be with you on
Two
this.
people who are codependent can be fire and gasoline, right?
Yes.
Drugs dig into your emotional dependency in the
So you
hippocampus.
think drugs and you are codependent?
Yes.
That's an interesting concept.
I think
I
that
really
me and drugs are codependent, and that's why we don't get along together. Because one of us will make us worse than the other, and we will build on that until it's too late.
What do you think about all this, Hannah?
Well, I think, first of all, that Lucas did a really beautiful way of explaining it when it comes down to the amygdala and that process in the brain. That's something I've known for quite a while, is that survival mode. Um, it's kind of like the path of least resistance. And at a certain point, you do start depending on that state of consciousness for things like your own confidence. Once certain amounts of people have seen you in that way, you feel like you need to show up that way for consistency. It's whatever kind of excuses you make to justify being in that state. And that's where that codependency comes in. It's like a trauma bond. Those things are very similar. You can do it with humans, you can do it with, places, locations, even with your family. Knowing that these things are not serving you, but you continue to stay in it because it did serve you at one point. It's codependency, it's not healthy, but for some reason you're still depending on it for some reason. And a lot of that is because there is that tie to that survival center in your brain. Your brain has now associated these states of consciousness with the place of safety, and this is what I do to survive now.
I get what you're saying. I get it from no, don't interrupt. I feel
Well,
it.
I just want to
Wait,
say one
wait,
thing.
wait,
Just
wait,
one
wait,
thing. Just
wait,
one thing.
wait.
Just one thing.
Let me finish.
No, no, no. Hold on. not only all of that, what she said, but drugs also jack up the dopamine more than any relationship you've ever had has.
Okay, and I get all of that. But when you're standing someplace, and imagine yourself out there, everybody out there who's listening, imagine yourself standing, and there's a glass wall in front of you, and on the other side of your drugs, and then to your left is your family, and to your right is the thing you care about most, but you are willing to shatter that glass to get to
Yes.
those drugs at the risk of injuring
Correct.
and damaging the people around you, including
Which is
mothers,
why we
fathers,
have to
children.
emphasize rewiring their brain, which you should know a lot about having a traumatic brain injury.
No, I get
You have
it.
to
It's just I'm
rewire
trying
the
to
brain
understand.
in order, and it takes a period of years. It really does. The thing is, I've conditioned myself over the last 15 years to turn to drugs anytime I needed to feel better because everything was making me feel bad.
We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
Hi, welcome back to Joke Corner with Lucas. Give it to me. Give it to me, she yelled. I'm so wet. Give it to me now. She could scream all she wanted, but I was keeping the umbrella. And we're back.
I guess I'm
So,
just trying to understand why
15
you would give
years
up
of
your
that.
family for
15
for
years
weed.
of that is a habit that is hard to break over a period of even 9 months. Mom, and
I get it. I'm listening.
the thing is, you just can't expect anyone to be perfect that quickly. You can't expect anybody to
No, I'm not
have
looking
the
for
common
perfection.
sense that quickly because nobody has had a rational mind 100% of the time.
And I'm not looking for perfection with you because I think you've done amazing. I am very proud that you are sober sitting here today.
And I'm glad to be.
But what I'm trying to understand, because there's a lot of parents out there who are feeling the same way that I have felt. We're trying to understand what it is, that thing, that core value that we either taught you or didn't teach you. And maybe that's
No,
not
it's
a fair
taught in
assumption.
us, but we taught over that when we rewired our brain with drugs. That's
It's
the
just-
thing, is like I live every day with integrity and compassion. That's a family value of mine. I
Totally.
also it goes out the window when the survival mode says drugs first. I will punch through that glass window because it will feel like that's my child in there or that's my partner in there. That's something
So it
I
literally
need now.
feels like something you're in love with.
Yes.
That is terrifying.
Terrifying. Yes.
So-
it's literally like that.
So how are you rewiring it? What are you doing?
You tell yourself every day not to do it, and then eventually, after 9 months, you start not doing it.
Do you have a mantra like saying things like, I'm going to lose my kids. I'm going to lose my family.
Why
I'm
would you
gonna
go
lose
for the
my
shame
sister.
side when it's
I'm
like
gonna
you
lose
need to
my
focus on
mother."
yourself first? I mean, in mental health, it's you first.
But that is you. If you
No.
lose those
No, no, no,
things,
no, no,
those
no, no, no.
people because they cannot manage
No,
your
no, no,
addiction.
no. The first focus is I love myself.
She wants to speak.
Well, yeah, just to go off what he's saying right here, I have had, many years of this struggle, and so to backtrack a little, like you asked, does this codependency and addiction and this, battle that we have with it, does it make us narcissistic? And I think in some cases, yes, but I think the more adequate way of describing it is it doesn't make us selfish. And I think absolutely yes, it turns us into, like you're saying, it's from someone outside looking in, they think this is absolutely ludicrous that we would pick up the thing and do the thing that has destroyed our lives over and over again. And to someone who's not an addict, and my family and my friends go, why would you go and do that thing that almost killed you again? And it's not like I'm consciously like, yep, today sounds like a great day to go and fuck up my life again.
Today's a good
It's
day
not-
to die.
yeah,
Yeah, really.
It's truly not like that. It's like it's literally like an infection of the mind. It is a disease. It is a sickness, and it takes over. But when it comes to our ultimate healing, I have tried to kick the stuff by saying I'm doing this for my family. Their threats, their conditions, what I'm going to lose, and you know what? It really just does not last. It does work at first, but when I realize now is that if I'm doing this for anyone but me, it simply will not stick. The thing that will make me recover in the long run is when I know I'm doing it for me. It's like that saying, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So the rehabs I've gone to, I wouldn't have gone unless I voluntarily went there and I worked the programs and I did the groups. If I felt that I was forced there and like held like a prisoner, I wouldn't have even gone to the groups. I would have been like, fuck this attitude the whole time. But what I needed was to know, like, yes, my family put me in here and everyone's worried about me. But especially with the most recent time I was in there, it was like, okay, something's got to give because I want to live, and choosing that for me, like, I want to live. I don't want to die at 30 years old. And whatever, I'm sure my family will be happy in the outcome, but this one time, I'm doing this for me. No one else. They will surely benefit from this, but if I'm not doing it for me, it's it's going to fall apart.
No, I agree.
And when it does, guess what comes back in? The guilt, the shame, the remorse, and that triggers me to go relapse and spiral down even further. So I think ultimately you have to decide that an addict, an alcoholic, or drug user, whatever it is, we will find means to achieve our state of pleasure, whatever it is, no matter what. Like we've learned through this art, through this unfortunate sickness that we have, to become master manipulators. To even when we don't have money of any kind, we will do whatever it takes to acquire that drug, that drink. So knowing myself, my family could lock me up in a room. They can make all these threats, have me take antabuse or breathalyzers or whatever. But knowing myself and that codependency, I know if I wanted to, I could sneak around that. So the true healing comes from, I have to figure out what's wrong in me, what wounds have not been dealt with that makes this continue to come up, because if I do it for anyone or anything else, it's just not going to work.
So let me ask you both a question. So my question really is pretty simple.
Yeah.
If you could say something to your family in a nutshell, what would it be?
That I'm sorry I didn't get educated on my mental health disorders quicker, because if I had, I probably have more skills in my tool belt in order to have dealt with this faster, and I probably wouldn't have gone through all this.
I wish I'd been able to do that for you. I tried.
That's okay. I was a stubborn 17-year-old teenager.
It was the programs. They wouldn't. You were 17 and considered an adult, but then every time I tried to get you some help, they'd say he was a youth. He was stuck in between. And then when he became an adult, there were no programs like this that we could afford to get him into, and there was nothing out there.
Right, Medicaid wouldn't cover it, and then programs like today, where you get something like an involuntary commitment, like I went through, that will thankfully pay your stay to these different places, but you really have to be like open to it. Otherwise, it just doesn't work.
And I just want to point out, people out there, that the IC that I did for Luke, the thing is something I have learned. 30 days does not help.
34 days was not enough for me because I relapsed after I got released.
Yes, he got relapsed immediately. The thing is that all that did was piss him off because he was going through the first full detox of his life. It wasn't until 6 months that he finally looked up and said, I'm doing this for me.
It took a long time. It took a lot more than a month for me to have bought into the programs. And now, having all this knowledge under my belt, I feel like I at least make healthier decisions than I used to.
So I don't believe that the 90-day rehab is sufficient to get someone sober. I don't.
I mean, 90 days is pretty good if you're like open to it. I think that 6 months of like IOP, which is when you go to a place or take a Zoom call to like do classes, I think that that's important for a lot of people. And I think that the focus on rehabilitation should be what we do in like criminal centers, you know? So like, say somebody gets pulled over for smoking weed, right? Their first goal, first offense, should be to get them into an IOP program, which educates them about how the brain works, why addiction happens, and all of this different stuff, hopefully gaining them tools under their tool belt if they're receptive to it, in order to avoid a second offense, because I think that's much more effective than punitive measures, I should say.
I just think it takes a lot longer than people give it credit for.
It
See,
does. A period
I'll
of years.
I'll
I
keep him
mean
there
that.
72 hours, sober him up, and put him on medication. It does not
It
work.
doesn't work. It doesn't work like
All it
that.
does is put a band-aid that lasts maybe 24
What do you have? A
hours.
magic dopamine pill? Like,
Yeah.
no, it doesn't work after 72 hours.
We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. Moist.
What a classic.
Nobody likes the word moist because it sounds like it feels like it tastes. I mean, when I hear the word moist, I think of spit all rolling around in my mouth, and I see like globs of crap just like on the ground. I always think of these. You know, you always see these guys that go and they're pulling up their snot and they spit it on the ground. And the first thing that comes to my head is moist.
First thing that comes to my head is that movie Click, where Adam Sandler has the biggest belly and he goes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm pretty sure what's slapping underneath is the moisture of sweat. Very moist area to be in.
Oh, gross. So today's word was moist. Do you have any comments out there?
Yeah. And we're back.
So, Hannah, what would you say to your family?
Oh, I mean, there's
It's
so
a tough
much
question.
there's so much I could say, but right now with what the most recent things that I've been through, the most recent thing I did was a detox. I was, put on an M1 hold because I relapsed pretty bad, and um, I'll just be transparent here. Made an attempt on my life, something I've never done before, but I was just at the brink of complete overwhelm and really just out of my mind, completely alone too. It was just a very dangerous situation. Luckily, I made it to a safe place because of an angel of a best friend, and I never experienced the hold. Right, I went to the hospital and then detox for 4 days. During that time, my family and friends had to move my entire apartment for me in like -2-degree weather, and they really came through for me. I never wanted anyone to have to do that. There's stuff that I should be able to do on my own. So I do have so much gratitude for them. I do have some shame around that, but they don't want me to feel that way at all. So first thing I would say is like, thank you so much for allowing me to get my healing and uh, just focus on me in that time of need and get me moved out of that very toxic place of stagnant energy, which was absolutely a huge reason of why it all transpired to become that ultimate moment. But then another thing I would like to say, is one thing that would mean so much to me, and I've heard this in the rooms and rehabs and detoxes, and I think I could speak for a lot of addicts, is there's a dire need for our family, if they care about us as much as they say they do, there is a dire need for them to attempt to try to understand addiction more than just from their perspective, especially if they aren't hardwired in their brains and never have personally gone through it themselves, which for that I'm grateful. I never want them to have to go through this, but there are programs like Al-Anon, or for them to come to meetings with us, or even just do some research on their own so that they could understand that this is not something we're intentionally trying to do. We're not trying to create havoc and heartbreak for the people we love. That would, for me, mean a lot if my family was able to see the other side, if they met me where I'm at, and we could kind of grow in this together. And then another thing I just want to say is like, I have seen my family grow so much. I mean, initially it was like, oh, you're disowned, kicked out if you ever mess up again. So what happened to me is if I relapsed, I said the very last thing I could ever do is let them find out. So what that turned into, I'm sure they didn't realize this, but it created an extremely unhealthy thing where when I relapsed, the people I needed the very most was my father and my family, and those were the people I absolutely could never tell. And because I was afraid this is my last chance, I won't ever have them again. So that guilt and shame, it was snowballing with I lied to them again, the people I love the most. Now drink more, drink more. And so that got me to a terrible spiraling place where when ultimately a thing would happen where they were notified.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
Okay, I get where you're coming from, but this goes to the original question. Do you think that it's a balance of fairness to assume that your family's not equally triggered? The one thing is that I hear from addicts, and I'm not pointing to you, is that if my family did this, if my family did that, I wouldn't spiral, I wouldn't drink, I wouldn't do drugs, I would not be in this dark place. But the thing is, every time, like I know you had an incident yesterday where someone freaked out on you. Every time I smell weed in my hallway, because here in Colorado it is legal, it triggers me. It triggers me. I am re-experiencing with PTSD fully, looking at my child laying in a hospital bed, watching an imaginary TV and overdosing and almost dying. I am triggered.
Oh yeah, I was watching Meerkat Manor. I remember that.
Yeah. But see, his perception of things is from the inside out of an addict. My perception of things, and remember I
After
told
getting
you I
charcoal bathed in my belly,
Yeah,
I was
this
watching
is
Meerkat
inside
Manor
out,
like
outside
crazy.
in.
It was pretty good.
Luke has overdosed multiple times
4
since he
times,
was
I
15.
think.
But yet, whenever we talk about his addiction, we only talk about his triggers,
Well,
his feelings. No, I'm going to
Producer, we're master manipulator narcissists with a victim complex, and that's a very, very like wild combination of things to be.
But see, you should embrace that then.
I do. That's why I get less and less
Because the
triggered
thing
every
is,
time when I
is
go
like,
through a hallway. I smoke weed, is because I am unpacking it every time it happens.
and I unpack it every time it happens. Your mom,
So
every
I think
time
that gives
she
you
looks
a.
at you, when was your suicide threat?
That happened on the night of January 26th.
Oh my God, it's fresh.
About a
So
month
your
ago.
mom, every time she picks up the phone, I 100% feel like she's probably triggered. I am.
Actually, yesterday.
If I don't hear from Luke for 24 hours, I start blowing up his phone because I think that he's out there and he is getting himself shot because he's hanging out with the wrong people or the wrong crowd or in the wrong moment or has triggered his. And then he's like, Mom, calm down. And I'm like, you don't understand. I have been carrying you in my arms as an addict for more than almost 13 years. You're finally sober. I'm terrified. I'm triggered and I'm in pain.
So I talk a lot about something called cultural transference. And so what that means to you is, so we have familial transference, right? We experience traumas between the people that we love, and those traumas trigger us in the future. And so we transfer that not only onto the people that we love that it happened with, but the people around us that they remind you of. Now, there's also cultural transference, which is something people don't talk about a lot, that I don't think that there's a term for, actually. But you also transfer from movies, music, and TV, and everybody around you that's ever given you trauma. So it makes sense to me that you getting triggered happens because, like,
I'm a parent. I'm in love with my child. I am
Of course.
terrified.
I
have a sister.
It's
When she had her car accident, it literally felt the same as what I wake up to you every day.
So, like, I just think that, like, with that being said, right, it just makes sense that everybody involved has some sort of emotional distress about it because, like, everyone got traumatized. You traumatized yourself in the process, and everybody around you got traumatized too. These are the shitty things that we have to, like, go to bed with, but I am willing to vocalize.
And I didn't mean to interrupt, so go ahead.
No, you didn't.
It was stressing me out because what I heard coming out of your mouth, I've heard from him. And I realized that I don't think you realize, I'm not blaming you for the damage you did to your family because it happens. But to be lacking compassion to the experience that they had, that's what I have a problem with.
I understand. And, like, I kind of want to clarify. So I am a very personally extremely empathic person, and I internalize what they felt so much so that, it does kind of get me trapped in this grief, trauma, shame, guilt cycle. And that is not, I'm not blaming my family at all. there's a certain amount of that I need to take into accountability and must feel in order to say this is not right. No one should have to go through this again. I'm not blaming them. And part of me vocalizing this is to say that I'm not blaming you, parents, but see where I'm coming from. And I do understand the emotional distrust, especially when they say, yeah, well, you've lied to us before. We thought you were doing good. And then to come find out you're in the hospital, how can we ever trust you again? And to that, I can only say, look, I can't prove it to you. I can't say anything. I can't, give you a guarantee, something to hold on to. Um, but at a certain point, I do believe that if you love this person and you're going to give them, like, if you really believe in them in this process, then there has to reach a certain point where you do let go and trust them. Because if you're in this fragile first stage of really trying to get your life together, but the people who love and support you the most are constantly saying, in one way or another, you can't do this. We don't believe in you, but you're going to do this again. Are you really taking the antabuse? I'm sure you could find a way to make it inert pills. I'm sure you could do this. They're literally planting the seeds of all the ways that you can lead to your own demise. They're planting that in your mind. When you have nobody that actually believes you're going to do it right, that in turn starts the wheels in your head that's like, no one believes I'm going to anyway. They just told me all these ways to beat the system. And so your mind kind of goes, well, like, fuck it. The people who are rooting for me the most don't even believe I can, so why should I believe in myself? Again,
Luke,
I'm not trying to blame. I'm just trying to say this has happened to me again and again. But when I've had the most chance ever was when my family was like, you know, they weren't blindly accepting it. They still had the reservations, but they limited that um that that voice that was so demeaning just to try and give me a chance to figure it out. And to that that allowing me freedom and time, but also arms wide open to understand that this is not something I want to do, that was when I had the longest amounts of sobriety under my belt.
Correct.
one of the things, the most respectful thing Luke has said to me this year that made me believe that he was actually going to try to get sober, he looked at me and he goes, "Don't trust me. I'm going to fuck this up, but Mom, I'm not going to give up." And
Exactly.
I would rather hear that because
Well, and every time
because
since then, I've told you every time I fucked up, which has all been like 2 times,
but
but
if your
it's been
family
enough.
didn't have to clean up your mess, they probably would have less to say. And I don't mean to be rude, and I've said these things to Luke. So, but like they went and cleaned out your apartment in 2-degree weather. There's a lot of families that wouldn't do that. I would do that.
Yeah,
Your
we
family
would do that.
clearly is pretty awesome because they did that. But it's like I've told Luke a million times. You can't tell me that I don't get to have explosive emotions if I'm always cleaning up the mess.
And
Because your mess
yep,
is interfering in my mess. Your mess is falling over into my day. If I didn't, out of sight, out of mind, which is not fair because I definitely don't want you ever out of sight
right.
or out of mind. But, when your shit, your drama, whatever anybody wants to call it, free flows into my life. Like, if I think for a minute, even remotely, that my grandson is at risk, I'll explode the world, including my own son.
Right.
But then when I can talk to him about that stuff. But when he was actively getting high, he'd be going, "I'm the victim. What is wrong with you? Everything you're saying is going to make me go get higher." And I'm like, look the fuck around. Your shit is flowing into my life and it's destructive. So I get what you're saying, but I'm also, and that's what this was about, is from the inside out, from the outside in. There is a direct contradiction in the way that the addict sees the family. The family is in pain, and I think that the addict has a responsibility to either that's why I said, like, I know people get high, but not in my house.
Right.
Keep it outside the door, and then I can function with it. I think that's how most families feel. You don't want me to talk about your addiction. You don't want me to address it. You certainly don't want me to judge it.
So you gotta look apart and stay apart.
You got to keep your addiction separate from the people, because
Yep.
you're destroying their life, even if it's just a little hammer tap at a time. For me, my PTSD, because I know there's an addict always talking about their PTSD. My PTSD is watching my son die. I wake up some days and, like, if I have to go get him or I don't hear from him, I literally have this whole fucking fucked up scenario in my head of, he has died. He has died. I don't know where he is. I have to find him, because if I lose my son, I lose everything. But then he showed up high at the house. The waking up and the fear. There's more than one fear. There's even a selfish fear in here. There's the fear that we're going to lose you. There's a fear that you're going to leave and we'll never see you again. There's a fear that I'm going to wake up and you are going to be in my home and it will self-destruct my home. There's so many fears that a parent, a sister, a brother, an aunt, an uncle, anybody who loves you, even a friend.
Can I frame the inside out contradiction to all of that?
Sure.
So every time you get high, right? In your mind, you think, I have to do something to make sure this doesn't get out, because otherwise my family will disown me. Otherwise my family will lose me. Otherwise my family will maybe never see me again because of the shame I hold under my head. The fear comes from finding ways to cope, that because you can't confide in most people, you can't talk to anybody, you can't share, your struggles most of the time, so you confide in drugs. When you don't have anybody to talk to and you hold it all in, that's when it's the most toxic.
But I believe the families are willing to talk. They just don't want to experience. And what I mean by that
Right.
is, I don't want to watch somebody stumbling around or being high or having dilated eyes. But you want to come talk to me.
Right.
I'm all ears.
Well, and
I can listen to you, and I can empathize, and I can sympathize. And
I think the
can actually
transparency
offer
helps
help.
a lot, And I think that,
But I'm awesome. I'm not like other parents. I'm fantastic.
I suppose, yeah. We have our awesome moments.
We were getting way too serious, people.
And now a word from our robot-generated content. Hey there, cat lovers. Are you tired of your feline friends ignoring you for hours on end? Well, get ready to immerse your cat in a world of adventure with Catastrophe, the ultimate virtual reality experience for cats. That's right. With Catastrophe, your cat can explore new worlds, catch virtual mice, and even interact with other virtual cats. You'll never have to worry about your cat being bored again. They'll be too busy living their best virtual life. And the best part? You get to watch all the hilarious hijinks unfold as your cat jumps, pounces, and chases their way through the virtual world. So if you want to keep your cat entertained and engaged, Catastrophe is the perfect solution. Get ready for your cat to take over the virtual world. Just be prepared for some serious competition from your furry friend. Damn it! Ow! Catastrophe.
Well, I think what you talked about before. I think a lot of it is just healthy boundaries, because as addicts, we understand we are expecting our families to come down hard and let us know, hey, the fear of almost losing you again when the last time was already so hard, we can't take this heartbreak again and again. So express your feelings. We know that this disease we're battling has caused immense pain, and that's part of our recovery. Is like, what can we do to make sure that this cycle stops? So we want to hear those things. And, like, for instance, your house, your home, your rules, absolutely set those guidelines down and expect those to be respected. And then there's the other side from us that, he just said, like, that transparency, opening up a safe space where we can talk about our struggles is extremely healing. To know, like, that's one way my parents have changed a lot. It used to be, ever again, you're done, you're gone, you're disowned.
Doesn't work.
That was soul crushing. But now I know, when I was in the hospital, after, slicing my wrists and, almost bleeding out, um, they were so shocked that I didn't call. Now I know no matter what happens, I can call my family. And whatever it is, whatever, if I relapse or whatever got me there, what matters is that I don't suffer alone. That's what made this last relapse so, so, so much scarier than any of the others, because I was suffering in complete silence and isolation. That's the only reason it got to that point. Because I thought, damn, my dad has paid for 2 rehabs now. How can I possibly fail him again? But when I spoke to him, it was genuine. You can call me about anything. He has made a complete change since years ago, and he really didn't understand the battle. He thought the way we keep her straight is conditioning, threats, but it did actually just make me feel more alone and more having to act out. So I see the way they've been changing and growing through this all. And all I can say from that is like, give me grace and understand I do want a good life. I want to heal. These things that happen to you through this battle of addiction are never intentional. And it's one of my biggest motivators to become clean is to not hurt the people who love me the most.
So I'm going to wrap this up.
Well, wait. I have one more point to make science-wise. Um, Sorry, here to drop some more education. What addiction has been described as is a disease of choice. And what that means is because it hits that amygdala, it hits your behavioral centers, it affects the way you make choices forever.
I don't believe it's a choice any more than smoking is.
Well,
Just so you know.
sure. So you get me,
Smoking
right?
is not. Oh, I totally get you.
Right, because you are a pack a day. Like you have an impulse to go do a thing because you have
right.
to. So
Your
like,
body has convinced you that it needs it to survive.
yeah.
No, I totally get where you guys are coming from, but it's
But
the lack of, it's the
disease of choice is like this,
compassion
right?
issue.
No,
Yes.
it's not a lack of compassion issue though, because like when you have that disease of choice, all of that goes to your back end reptile brain survival mode. And none of that deals with emotions. All that deals with is how I'm going to live till tomorrow. And that becomes so much more important than anything else because, well, how the hell am I going to live till tomorrow if I don't feel good enough to get through this snowstorm? Um, in the disease of choice, it's a lot like cancer, in which it can go into remission, but it can always come back. That's the
So you
problem with
always gotta fight
addiction.
it.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's one day at a time, right? Or in my case, even after 9 months of rehab, fucking 1 second at a time. And that sucks because like it does take a lot of time to even get to this point. It's like how daunting, right? But
It weirdly takes practice.
yeah, who'd have thought? Practice, rewiring
They
your
should call
brain.
it practicing sobriety, not getting
So
sober.
I think it slowly kills you a lot like cancer does. I think that even though you're the one putting your body through the stress, it's still a disease of the choice you made. Because your pathological need and desire for this thing overpowered all of your memories and love. And that is how it works. It does not matter how much compassion you show throughout the day. It does not matter how much empathy you can have because all of that can drop like that. The minute your brain says, I need this to survive right now.
Yeah, it comes down to like when we did the hold your breath. Oh, why did you breathe? It was put to me in a very simple way, and it kind of just blew my mind because he's like, well, you took a breath because your body said, I have to breathe. And it comes down to where we're like, okay, food, water, shelter, alcohol, or drugs. Those are like our basics. Our mind has determined this is what we need to survive. Now, this is not permanent. It's about recreating those neurological paths of least resistance in our mind. Right now, they're very deep trenches, but there are ways through talking openly and consciously, having support groups, and diving into self care and whatever it is. If you have a higher power or something that you can connect to transcend that, I do believe that we do recover. But like he said, one day at a time. When I thought in my mind, I will never drink another day in my life, that comes back to the overwhelming needing to escape. This is too much. So don't want to look at the overall picture forever the rest of your life. thinking about it one day at a time and having people who understand your struggle, that you can be honest 100%, and even just one person in your life that you don't hide anything from, that can save your literal life.
I want to thank everybody out there for joining us for the Fruit Punch podcast.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Why don't you go ahead and go get us on our socials? We have Twitter, we have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have
YouTube.
TikTok, we have YouTube, we have all of it except for Spotify. Which
Don't forget Hannah Bliss on Bandcamp. And
1H,
Hannah
no
will
space.
be joining us sometimes whenever she's here. I think that she's got a lot to offer, and we are looking forward to a new partnership in podcasting.
Are you
Have
got any final words?
Yeah, I'm extremely excited for this opportunity. I think we can really make big moves. This is something that I've been wanting to do for a while, and especially since Corona happened, I know that podcast is kind of the new direction for things.
Coronavirus?
All right, that's Hannah Bliss 1H no space .bandcamp.com. That's at Fruit Punch Pod and at Fruit Punch Pod Official for any of the socials that you need to get to. And we'll be back.
Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.